goal, of course, through all that pomp and circumstance for the United States is for North Korea to get rid of its nuclear weapons program. In the joint declaration, it reads, the DPRK commits to work toward complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. What's not in there is how or when that would happen. Here's the president talking about that a short time ago.
What timetable do you envision for their denuclearization? And in the meantime, are you thinking about easing any sanctions?
Well, you know, scientifically, I've been watching and reading a lot about this, and it does take a long time to, pull off complete denuclearization. It takes a long time. Scientifically, you have to wait certain periods of time, and a lot of things happen. But despite that, once you start the process, it means it's pretty much over. You can't use them. That's the good news. And that's going to start very, very soon. I believe that's going to start very soon. We will do it as fast as it can mechanically and physically be done, Steve.
And the sanctions?
The sanctions will come off when we are sure that the nukes are no longer a factor. Sanctions played a big role.
Mr. President, the joint statement does not talk about verifiable or irreversible denuclearization.
Yeah.
Is that a concession on the part of the United States?
No, not at all, because if you look at it, it said we are going to, let's say here, it will be gone. I don't think you can be any more plain than what we're asking. Issues related to the establishment of the new U.S. DPKR relations, the building. We talk about the guarantees, and we talk about unwavering commitment to the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. This is the document that we just signed.
Did you discuss with Chairman Kim methods to verify, either with the United States or international organizations, that very process? And do you
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. And we'll be verifying. Yeah, we'll be verifying. It'll be verified.
How is that going to be achieved, Mr. President?
Well, it's going to be achieved by having a lot of people there. And as we develop a certain trust, and we think we have done that, Secretary Pompeo has been really doing a fantastic job, his staff, everybody. As we do that, we're going to have a lot of people there, and we're going to be working with them on a lot of other things. But this is complete denuclearization of North Korea, and it will be verified.
Will those people be Americans or international?
Combinations of both. Combinations of both. And we have talked about it.
So, Victor Cha, it's clear that hasn't been discussed or worked out at all, the verification part of this. And that word verify, in fact, does not appear in this joint declaration anywhere. Working toward complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula is a worthy goal. But how reasonable is that from the North Korean point of view? Is he going to do that? Is Kim Jong-il going to do that? And if so, how would we verify it?
Well, the first thing you would do, Willie, in verifying, you'd want a complete and full declaration of all nuclear weapons, weapons precursors, facilities, and expertise that then could be verified, identified, and located and verified by the International Atomic Energy Agency. These sorts of specifics are completely missing from this document. You kind of wonder, did we really need a summit to get this document? There's nothing on CVID. There's nothing on time frame. I had heard a lot about trying to get some sort of time frame, and particularly the year 2020, into a document of this nature, given the president's time in office. And clearly they were not able to get any of those things. So there's a lot of specifics that are missing in this, given the very high expectations, given the fact that we pulled out of the Iran deal and we said we want something better than the Iran deal. That was a 110-page document. This is, doesn't really measure up.
Big picture on this, as someone who's worked on North Korea, as you have, what was your view of it? Even just seeing the two men walk out in the North Korean and United States flags next to each other, was this a good thing, bad thing from the United States point of view?
Sure. I think it was clearly a historic thing. No sitting president has done this before. We need to talk to the North Korean leader if we really want to try to solve this problem, because he's the only one who makes decisions. Diplomacy is always about the relative, right? Relatively speaking, if we weren't doing this, we would probably be near an armed conflict. That's certainly where we were headed in December of 2017. So in that sense, yes, this is a good first start in terms of diplomacy, but there's still a very long way to go. And if you look at the balance sheet, it seems like Kim got a lot more out of this meeting than Trump did.
Yeah. So a South Korean military official is telling NBC News that they really want to look deeper at the president's comment regarding ending of the combined military drills, the war gains comment. They want to understand the exact meaning or the intention behind that. Jeremy Bash, let's though look at the visuals here, because the ribbon cutting aspect of this in itself is huge. has not happened before. I feel like the rest of this sits on the lap of Mike Pompeo and others to actually execute. And the question is, can we back into it this way? Is it possible?
Well, the imagery is hopeful.
It is.
In some ways, it's quite touching. I'm saying that a little tongue-in-cheek because obviously the president was gauzy in his praise of a despot and a dictator, and I don't think any conversation about this should neglect the fact that Kim Jong-un is a murderer, a thug. He starves his own people. And putting him on the stage with the president, I don't care what anybody says, is a major concession and a give to him. Mm-hmm. That said, dialogue is better than military action. But I do agree that the agreement is entirely lopsided. It is the most vague, the most loose, the most unspecific with regards to the verification, the accounting, and the inspection piece. And it is the most specific, most concrete, most onerous on the United States with respect to ending military exercises. And those military exercises serve multiple purposes. Not only do they deter aggression by the North, but they serve other interests in the Asia-Pacific region. So I think taking those off the table is going to be to the detriment of American national security.
Joe?
So, Richard, we know what the North Koreans got out of this. They had a murderous despot share the stage with a representative of the United States of America. They're getting the suspension of military exercises, which I'm sure our allies, like the Japanese, may not be particularly pleased with. What did the United States get out of this?
Well, I think what this did is it stopped a drift towards war that with the conversation we were all having on this set, 3, 4, 5, 6 months ago, Joe. So that's been put in abeyance. So I think that's one thing that's positive. And I guess to make it a sunny day, you would say it at least holds out the potential for addressing some of the specific threats posed by North Korea, above all the nuclear missile threat. And there's nothing in here that interrupted the freeze on testing of nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles. So I would say that's essentially what we got. And the fact also that the United States, for some at least, that we seem to be embracing diplomacy. This is an administration that spent the last several days not just kicking its allies, but seeming to reject the normal give and take of diplomacy. But I don't want to exaggerate what I'm saying here. Most of the upsides are potential for us. Most of the upsides, I think, are much more immediate and tangible for North Korea and also China. I would just say that this outcome, to me, looks like nothing so much as the proposal China floated months ago when they talked about a freeze for freeze, a suspension of North Korean testing in exchange for a suspension of U.S. South Korean military exercises. I expect that Xi Jinping is going not bad. Chance of war down, weakens the U.S.-South Korean alliance, raises questions for Japan. Sanctions will begin to loosen. I would say it's a pretty good day in Beijing.
So it's hard not to be incredulous to hear the president's sort of his take on how to work all this. They presented a video to the North Koreans about all the wealth they could amass in the future, and then the president said this.
They have great beaches. You see that whenever they're exploding their cannons into the ocean, right? So I said, boy, look at that. Wouldn't that make a great condo behind? And I explained, I said, instead of doing that, you could have the best hotels in the world right there. Think of it from a real estate perspective. You have South Korea, you have China, and they own the land in the middle. How bad is that, right? It's great.
So I think, Joe, it might be time for some deep historic parallels and perspective on that comment and so many others.
Yeah, I think so. John Meacham, this is just too easy. We hear that history rhymes. Here it is. It's just the same words used in verse 1 and verse 2. Where, I mean, you can go from whether you're talking about what happened at the Appomattox courthouse, or whether you're talking about what happened in Versailles during the Paris Peace Accords of 1919, or even Kissinger going to Paris to end the Vietnam War. They all talked about beachfront condos. That's the great equalizer here between nations. It is Donald Trump still. Donald Trump, the real estate developer, and he doesn't realize that this dictator doesn't want beach condos. He wants nuclear weapons, and I don't think he has any plans to go the way of Gaddafi.
Yeah, remember George Kennan's great telegram about how to lay out the hospitality industry throughout the Soviet Union. It's a key. Richard actually keeps a copy of that on his desk, I think. Two thoughts. Just because something hasn't happened before doesn't mean it's historic. That's one thing. I think when you call something historic, it means that it has a good chance of having lasting implications. And I think it's very unclear, at least to my layman's eye, that this does that. I think Richard's exactly right. If I were China right now, I'd be thinking, hey, I just had a pretty good week because these two other figures are making my life easier. The other question, and this is a direct historical point, is negotiating with nation states that have some accountability within their body politic is a different thing from negotiating with dictators. And I think if we didn't learn anything else from the 1930s, I think we learned that happy symmetry, empty words, potentially empty words, and lots of flags and lots of ceremony don't necessarily lead to the consequences that we hope for. And so I think a dose of healthy skepticism here is important. This is the kind of thing that would ordinarily cap a long process, not begin one. Perhaps this is the right way to do it. We'll see. But we're not dealing with, in North Korea, a kind of regime where there are any checks and balances, whatever, inside. So we're dealing with and this may sound somewhat redundant, we're dealing with a figure who thinks of himself as autonomous, who worries somewhat about his survival, but more or less wants to endure and have no accountability to his people. And I am talking about North Korea there, just to be clear.
All right, everyone stay with us. We have so much more to get to, included a pointed question to the president about his budding relationship with North Korea's dictator amid a decaying relationship with Canada's leader, among other longtime American allies. You're watching Morning Joe. We will be right back.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.